You may have heard about the flipped classroom or about blended learning, in which the idea is to use online content to improve the quality of education for your enrolled on-campus students. The flipped classroom is a different mode of teaching than most of us as professors are used to. The series of videos will tell you how to go about implementing this flipped classroom. As a Stanford professor, for over a decade I was teaching the same class. Year after year, I would walk into the same room, say the same words to the same room, even tell the same jokes. And after 10 years of doing this, I really started to wonder if this was the best way for me to serve my students. Fortunately, with the flipped classroom, we now have a better way to teach our students. In a traditional classroom, students come to the classroom to get the content. You or I would broadcast the lecture content at them, and then they would go home to practice with the material by doing the homeworks or whatever other work we assign to them. In the flipped classroom, this process is reversed. They would first get the lecture content at home by watching videos on the website, and ideally this website content would be paired with online assessments that give students instant feedback on how well they're understanding the material. Having gotten the content at home, the classroom time can then be used for them to practice with the material. So they can watch the lectures at home, and this preserves the classroom time for them to come in to engage in activities where it actually makes sense for you and them to be in the same room. You can use the classroom time to have conversations or discussions with your students. You can lead your students in solving problems together. There are many other activities that you can use the classroom time for that we'll discuss in later videos. But for me, teaching in the flipped classroom, I've gotten to know my students much better. I've had much more time to mentor the students, the weaker students one-on-one. I've also had much more time to talk to the stronger students about research. But most important, I think this has led, in my class certainly, to much better learning outcomes. Here, I think, are some of the reasons for flipping your classroom. First, your students will enjoy increased engagement, in which rather than walking into the classroom to be lectured at for an hour, they instead come into the classroom for active collaborative learning where they're doing things and they're talking to you or talking to other students or solving problems and debating it with you or their friends. It's just so much more interesting for the students to be doing stuff throughout your 60-minute or 90-minute class. Flipping the classroom also allows you to deliver much more personalized learning. Students can decide how best to engage with the lectures offline, and when they come to the classroom, you could have had a look at the submissions that the students had just submitted on the website so that you know where each student is, and you can go to the students that are confused and give them one-on-one mentoring. With the data and analytics that the website provides, you can also get more immediate, much more nuanced feedback on student performance. So the night before class, you can maybe look at an instructor dashboard to see what quizzes students are getting right or wrong. And this allows you to do what's called just-in-time teaching, where you adapt your teaching, adapt your content almost on the fly to teach to exactly what the students are confused about, or to teach to exactly what you think would be most useful for your students to see next. Flipping your classroom also gives you additional efficiency as an instructor. Rather than spending all your time grading homeworks or preparing and delivering the same lecture over and over, you can now use more of your time to actually interact with students and deliver much more focused, high-quality interactions with your students. I personally find this much more fun, but more important is that these more interactive modes of teaching result in much better student outcomes. In fact, there have been many pedagogical studies that show that there are these more interactive modes of engagement that result in much better student outcomes. For example, if you use a traditional lecture to teach, then you get a certain level of attendance, engagement, and learning. But with more interactive modes of teaching, you get substantially improved student attendance, engagement, learning. And, this is not like a 1 or 2% improvement in student learning. This is, like an over 30% improvement in student learning. And so I hope that you will have these sorts of outcomes in your flipped classroom as well. To close off this video, I'd like to share just one more thought, which is that flipping the classroom isn't a specific technique. It is a mindset. What I mean by that is that flipping the classroom is best done with the following mindset. In a traditional classroom, the student focus is on what you do, is on this big performance that you do in front of the classroom. But in a flipped classroom, the focus isn't on you, instead is on the students. And instead the students focus on what they are doing rather than on what you are doing. And I think by placing this focus on the student activity rather than on your activity, this also places the responsibility on the student to make learning happen. And that is where the responsibility should lie. Many of us as instructors were hired for our subject matter knowledge. So I was hired at Stanford because I guess I'm an expert in computer science, rather than because of our ability to facilitate or to guide learning. So I think teaching in the flipped classroom is a new skill. And if you're wondering, what do I do with all this classroom time that I now have? This and the next few videos will tell you what the techniques are and what the mindset is for teaching in the flipped classroom. And by going through these videos, I hope you come away able to implement the flipped classroom effectively for your own class.